You good? I did turn it on. Yep, I think I hear it. All right, welcome everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to our first get together, meet up, whatever. We are looking forward to this year. We're going to do a whole series of get-togethers. Hopefully, we'll have a growing group as the year goes by and the word spreads about all the fun that we're having. And so we're looking forward to that. We were planning on having a special guest, but he's not able to be with us today. So we have another special guest instead. Vicki Lewis and myself. So what we're going to do today, we're going to kind of introduce the concepts and ideas, principles that we're going to be implementing and talking about how to implement over the coming year. And so Vicki, come on up. So Vicki's going to do an introductory thing, and then I'm going to come on and say a few thoughts that I had that I wanted to share, and then Vicki's going to come back and tell us more details about some logistics, homestead logistics. Can we call it that? So
it's actually called a moment in the garden.
Okay, we're going to call it a moment in the garden, but we'll come back to that, right? Yeah. Okay. There we go. Okay. Put that somewhere.
Yeah. Set this down there. Hey, well, good afternoon. Glad to see everybody. Come on in and sit wherever you'd like. Well, it's called the Purposeful Homestead. And what I wanted to share right now is that, you know, if we've learned anything in the last couple of years, it's that many Americans do not have sufficient preparedness plans. At the beginning of 2020, we realized that most Americans didn't have enough toilet paper or food, even to last maybe a few days. 100 years ago, life was quite different than it is now. Well, I forgot to change. That was my last slide. So 100 years ago, life was quite different. The world was largely rural or small town. Rural families embraced farm life. Because there was so much work to do all the time, the whole family really was involved in working the farms. The men mostly were repairing things, building things. Oh, I'm going ahead of myself here. And the women and the wives and the mothers, they were doing household chores like cooking and sewing and canning and caring for the babies. But they also worked out in the farms quite a bit as well, because there was so much to do. But the women also took care of the feeding these hardworking men on the farms. Well, grocery shopping was quite different back in the day as well. 100 years ago, it consisted in a grocery store mostly of just staples like flour and sugar and the like. During this period of time, most of the grocery stores didn't really carry things like vegetables and meat and stuff. That people were just doing that on their own at home. These days, markets look nothing like they did in the past. We in the United States are used to living in the land of, plenty. But all that may be changing. Today, the idea of living on a farm surrounded by several acres of land and living off that land is highly appealing for people who are concerned about the condition of the world, the frailty of society, our failing infrastructure, and for those who desire just a little self-sufficiency. The increase of pandemics that we've seen in the last couple years, wars and threats of war, which are right in front of us even as we speak, cyber attacks that we've had and that are probably in our future, out of control weather patterns causing droughts, flooding, hurricanes, tornadoes, fire, freezing, and on and on. And the increase of food and supply shortages. According to the USA Today from last July, some of the items that were in short supply last year were foam, face masks, web cameras, used cars, camping equipment, hand sanitizers, disinfecting wipes, toilet paper, thermometers, affordable housing, lumber. I'm sure some of you have experienced that. Seeds, there was a real shortage on being able to get seeds last year. Gardening equipment and supplies, fertilizers, and even freezers, as well as many food items like flour and yeast and ketchup and grape nuts. And basically a lot of things that we're used to seeing on a well-stocked grocery shelves that we see all the time. All of these have given rise to concerns about the availability of everything that we once took for granted. So let's talk about homesteading. Is there a difference between homesteading and prepping? Homesteaders are people who have taken steps into the world of self-sufficiency, living off the land. These individuals may grow their own food, butcher their own livestock, and even make their own clothes. Homesteaders typically engage in growing gardens, canning, animal husbandry, craft work, and renewable energy. Most homesteaders are aiming to be completely self-reliant and, in essence, are living more like we did 100 years ago. Preppers prepare themselves for looming disasters, including terrorist attacks, tornadoes, hurricanes, pandemics, apocalypse, and just about everything in between. Depending on their preparedness and skills, preppers may be set to survive anything from a power outage to a nuclear war. The average prepper has a stockpile of food, a bug-out bag, and some basic survival skills, and a disaster plan. They've taken steps to protect themselves and their loved ones in the unfortunate event that supply chains fail, cell towers have a problem, and utilities cease to function. If homesteaders and preppers teach us anything, it is that we need to be prepared for the unknown. We need to look into what is essential to our survival. After all, we never know what tomorrow will bring. Thus, the purpose of the Purposeful Homestead. That's our motto: be peaceful, be purposeful, be prepared. Be peaceful, to me, that comes from trusting God, not trusting my stock of stored food, not trusting my water source, not trusting my bank account, not trusting my abilities, not trusting the government, but knowing that nothing takes God by surprise and I can trust Him. Be purposeful, have a plan, and implement that plan. Know why you're doing what you're doing. And be prepared. Don't depend on someone else for all your needs, not the grocery store or a handyman or the government. Be actively preparing for the unknown. Be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So the main focus of our monthly meetings is to get to know each other, to network together, to encourage one another in our desire to be more prepared, and to share our homesteading skills together. Most of us could Google just about anything we want to know about any subject, but being self-sufficient doesn't mean that we never need anything from anybody else. No homestead is an island. When it comes to homesteading, there is a lot to be said about self-sufficiency, self-reliance, and blazing our own trail. However, one thing that hasn't been talked about too much is the important role community has. that plays in building that self-sufficiency, and how to cultivate community while doing it, while having your homestead. Community connections gives us the opportunity to recreate the old-fashioned barter and trade system, to support our local businesses, and to work with others to build strong and sustainable homesteads. A true story. A man and his wife used wood heat and loved the process of gathering wood, cutting wood, and heating their home. But due to his health, he wasn't able to get out and chop the wood last year that they needed. His co-workers and a small town community decided to have a firewood day for him. At 9 o'clock one cold and wintry late February morning, the trucks and people, and they descended with all the tools, chainsaws, and all the tools to the location that they determined. And everyone spent like 5 or 6 hours there chopping and splitting and cutting wood for this family. It's heartwarming to see that the men and women and children of this small town community came together to help a family in need. Someone involved in the story said it was an emotional day because this is the kind of thing you don't often see in communities anymore, especially after this past year when everybody was so disconnected and scared of being together. So that's what we're hoping to establish with our monthly Purposeful Homestead meetings. Community members coming together to encourage one another and working together to build strong, sustainable homesteads, to be prepared for who knows what may come in the future. Okay, so now I'll turn it over to Pastor Hess. Somewhere.
All right, thank you for that introduction. So I'm going to repeat some of those things and kind of expand, maybe throw a couple of other ideas at you. In a second here, we'll get the computers changed over. And I do have a handout here, which perhaps Gideon can pass out. Here, why don't you take that and I'll take this. Not now. All right. Anybody recognize that? Yeah. It's one of the best places in the world for living. Scott Valley. No, I don't have any more. You can make more copies or you can share. I just found this, I believe that's French Creek drainage there, and that's the Russian Wilderness area. Scott River here in the foreground. Anyway, okay, so Vicki mentioned homesteading and prepping, and when you think about those things, and then the older term that I remember as a kid was survivalist. You know, the dude running around the woods with a Rambo knife and, machine gun. And I actually know people not too far from here who have bunkers that are pretty well stocked. So those are the survivalist preppers. And then we have our kind of hippy dippy back to the earth that can live off of pine nuts and, roots and berries from the woods. That's fun too. So we have all these different terms out there. And so before we can really label ourselves, or maybe we don't want to label ourselves, but I want to start with the question of why. Like, what is it? What's the reason for all of these things. And then as we think about the reason why, then that will help us to kind of move into a purposeful approach to this whole subject that may defy labels just a little bit, but if we have our purpose clearly in mind, then that helps to guide us. Does that make sense? I think that's true of most things in life. So start with why. So let's just have a little discussion. Why, like all of you showed up here today for this topic. So why is this of interest to you? What's the purpose for all this prepping or homesteading or whatever it is that we're doing? Okay. Why? Why is that important? Because Sears Roebuck doesn't make a catalog anymore, right? So, yeah. Okay, so that's that. I thank you for speaking out. I appreciate that. And so yes, we want to have knowledge on how to do things to make our lives better, more comfortable in times or situations where there may be a challenge. Okay? Anything else? So we don't die. Yes, okay. So if you run out of toilet paper, you probably won't die, but there are some things out there where you could die if you don't have some kind of preparation. Like run out of food, water, like there's lots of things. And so, yeah, I want to kind of roll with this so we don't die. So why is that important?
We need to eat and drink.
Okay. Yeah. So you're getting onto the how to not die. Well, but my question is, why is not dying important? So, yellow shirt.
Oh, yellow shirt.
Bob.
I was not exactly on not dying. I'm here I want
Okay.
humanity.
Yeah.
We are,
Yes.
created to live like that, and so that when outside systems fail, it doesn't cause too much of an emergency.
Okay, that's good.
My main reason is so that I can learn, so that I can survive longer
Okay.
and not be dependent upon a system.
Yeah.
And also help others.
Okay. Oh, that's an important one. So not dying, living better, we could say, and being able to help others. Yes? Okay. Okay. So now, and that connects with the helping others. So helping others starts with my family, right? And so a lot of us have a ethical and moral belief system that tells us that providing for our family is important. And this is my responsibility to help my family to not die. And at the same time, not just to not die, but to live a better quality of life. Okay, so I think this is a challenge that sometimes certain types of preppers or survivalists get caught up in a certain way of doing things that doesn't actually make life better in general. It just adds a lot of things that they have to do. And so the bottom line reason that we care about people, we life is good, and we want it to be good, not only for ourselves, but for our family and for our extended community. And so knowing how we cannot die and how we can make our quality of life better, like that's what you were talking about, was the how, like the different things we have to have. That's important once we have the why. So having a family, having others around us, that extended community and those connections, so that we are here because we love people. Like this connects us back to the spiritual dimension. We love people, ourselves, our family, extended community. And in order so that all of us can live longer and better, then that's the approach that we want to take, right? So then that should kind of guide us in our thinking about what it is that we're doing. So when there's a particular prep, particular thing that could come to our attention, we should have a thought process like, will this make my life better? Will this make the life of my family and my community better? So if it's just something that helps me to not die, but it actually detracts from the quality of life of the community, then like there's some sort of ethical problem with that. And there are some approaches where they don't care about the rest of the community. It's all just about me. And that's not why we're here. And it turns out actually that that's not really the best way to survive anyway, because community connection, like throughout history, the best way to survive is to be a part of a community of people working together. So it turns out that practical results and morality and spiritual approaches actually belong together. All right, so now what do we need? And I want us to, for now, we're not going to get deep into the details. It's sort of a big overview, a way of thinking about our needs. So before I throw that up, I know you have the handout. You can look ahead if you want to. But what are our needs to not die and to live a better life? Well, I generally like to think of those, and it depends on if you're a lumper or a splitter, right? You can make a long list or a shorter list. But I like to think basically of 4 categories of needs. And of course, most preppers and survivalists and all the things that you hear about is physical survival. So we have physical needs. We also have mental needs. And that's actually been highlighted in the last couple of years, the mental health issues that have developed because of the way that this pandemic has been handled are really significant. And so mental health our mental needs are equally important with our physical needs. Social, and that kind of, you see how these all connect to each other, our social needs and then our spiritual needs. And if we're going to have a good quality of life, both in this life and in whatever's next after this life, it's important to pay attention to all of those. And unfortunately, some people get a little unbalanced in just, there are some people that are so spiritual that they get all just on spiritual and they forget all about physical health and all the physical needs. That gets out of balance. And there's a lot of people that's the other way. They got all the physical preparation for every disaster you can think of, but their spiritual health is just non-existent. That's not a great way to live either. So we want to really look at, as we're finding ways to live a better life and prepare for whatever may come next, to address all of these needs and not just one small piece of one segment of this. Does that make sense so far? Everybody following there? All right, so here's an example of a way to think about needs. And we could do this for each of those 4 areas. I just wrote it out for the physical. The first is just basic essentials. Shelter, water. I put fire in parentheses. It's a traditional one. We can talk about whether that belongs here or in the next category, but and then food. So if you don't have shelter, water, or food in most places in the world, you're not going to live very long. Right? So shelter is a matter of hours. If you get stuck out here on Forest Mountain in the middle of the night and you don't have any shelter in the winter, it could go bad for you. Like shelter is like super important. Water can live a matter of days without water, probably weeks without food for most of us. I didn't put air on there. Maybe we should put air, like, right? That I think air. Well, yeah. So we can put air on the list. But is this making sense? It's like we're not going to store up air, right? That's not a thing. But we can live in an area where there's air to breathe. All right. I've labeled this instrumental needs. So these are important things, but they're not at the same level as this. Like this is important for just survival in the moment or in the hours. These are things that we really need for that quality of life. Oh, absolutely. You disagree? What? Well, I didn't say this is a comprehensive list. Shoot, Bob, I didn't say this was a comprehensive list, okay? There may be additional needs that are not on this list. But I could tell you, if you don't have physical security, you're not going to be worried too much about your piano, whether it's in tune or not. Right? So, yeah. So is this making sense? We have basic essentials. We have instrumental needs, which are kind of a next level. Some people would put the piano maybe at the next level. You know, there's Maslow's hierarchy, which, you know, Maslow, he did some good thinking about that. But the reality is, I think the hierarchy is not really, I mean, in one sense, yes, it's a hierarchy, but ultimately, if we're looking at quality of life, it's not a hierarchy where you can start with just the bottom part and have a good life. You have to have all of those things in order to have a quality life. And so that gets us back to, you know, physical, mental, spiritual, social, and then these things. Like if you have shelter, water, fire, and food, like you could live in a cave by yourself. Well, who wants to do that? I mean, you could get the state to put you in solitary confinement and give you food and water and shelter, but nobody really wants that, right? There's something more than that. So security, the ability to move, your own mobility, communication with other people, and healthcare. Put healthcare in, and we could debate that. But seeing as we live in a world where stuff happens, turns out healthcare is kind of an important thing. So, all right. Anybody have any big things you have to add to this other than music? Music is essential, I know. Anything else? Okay. I this from in medicine we have this thing we call activities of daily living and then instrumental activities of daily living, right? So it's sort of this reflects the activities of daily living. You know, like if you can feed yourself, you can get some water, you can shelter, take yourself to the toilet, all that. But in order to, you know, buy your food or move to where your food is to get it, or take your family to a safe place, like those are the next level things. All right. Now I'm going to talk about levels or layers. We might think of this as levels, or we could think of these as different things that interconnect more like a web. But again, looking at the physical aspect, and again, as we go forward, we want to be thinking about all those others too, the mental, social, and spiritual. But the physical aspect, first layer or level here is what we might call wilderness survival or wilderness living. If you can just walk out in the woods with nothing and survive, that's pretty cool. And it also gets you the level of knowledge and skill where you're going to be able to survive most disasters and with the appropriate level of skill, you could actually live fairly comfortably out in the woods without modern technology. So that's kind of how we define this level. Like if you can walk out there, you know what to eat, you know how to procure food, water, how to provide your own shelter, how to start a fire, all of those things without any modern conveniences, that's a pretty solid level of survivability. And you know, there's TV shows where they drop people in random places and see how long they can survive, and like I mean, it's fun stuff, but it's also like serious stuff. When, you know, if you're on Cecilville Road and your car breaks down, certain times a year, it might be a while before anybody comes along, and then like you're back to like, well, that's wilderness survival. You may have some modern stuff with you, or you may not. You know, we don't know what the situations are going to be. All right, I'll come back to that, but I'm going to go on. So the next level is more what we would consider homesteading, and this is at your home, providing for the needs that you have for you and your family, all those basic needs. So using agriculture, basic technologies, things like that. And within the technology, of course, I think it's helpful to think of this in layers. So again, the layers, one would be pre-grid or, you know, pre-electric, pre-petroleum technology. So hand pumps, hand tools, chopping wood by hand, having a saw, sort of those, what you might say like 200 years ago, you go back 200 years, how did homesteaders live 200 years ago? So there's a certain level of technology that's available and a certain level skill set that goes with that. The next level up would be, well, so we have electricity and gasoline, so let's use them. Why not? So we have chainsaws and we have rototillers and we have power tools. That's all good. So but you see what I'm talking about, layers here. If the grid is down and you run out of gasoline, do you still have a way to, you know, turn over your garden? You still have a way to drill a hole if you need to drill a hole in something, and your little cordless drill battery ran down and the power's out. Like, can you still drill a hole? Like, well, there's ways to do that, but you have to have some skills, and it might help to have some of that old style technology. All right, and then of course we have our electronic or computer age. So this is, you know, all the sophisticated stuff. When you think about solar panels, right? You can put up a solar panel and collect electricity. But you can get more efficiency if you have a solar panel that rotates automatically to track the sun. You can get a lot more power that way, but that requires a little level of sophistication, which is great. Do we want to depend on that? Well, not necessarily. That's why we think in layers, right? We have layers of skills and technology and tools so that we're not dependent on any one, and doing that in a way that contributes to our quality of life, I think is important. So let's see. Next, Vicki mentioned this already, disaster preparedness, and I'll put down apocalypse preparedness. So those are kind of two different things. Although you might say the apocalypse is a disaster, but I think of these, disaster preparedness is like a wildfire comes through and burns over your place. Like, how are you going to react to that? That's a disaster. You know, a flood, blizzard, any of that kind of stuff. You know, those folks back east that got stuck on the freeway in the blizzard. You heard about that in the news, what, a couple of weeks ago? It was like, why did that make the national news? Like, I don't know, like, because people were not prepared. They didn't know how to, like, one of the, I better not go off too far on that. Anyway, so that level, like disaster preparedness, your car breaks down in the middle of nowhere. You know, I don't know. There's all sorts of disasters that happen. But the apocalypse thing is more of like, I think of that as major socioeconomic upheaval, or maybe an EMP and the whole grid is down. Like, that's not coming back up tomorrow or next week. Like, we're talking about months of, like, nobody's coming to help you. If the whole grid is down from an EMP and we're waiting on parts from China to come to fix our grid, because most of our grid relies on parts from China, and what if China did the EMP and they're not sending us parts? Well, we're pretty deep at that point. So that's a whole nother level of preparedness. And again, going back to these, like, if you have these levels lined out here, those things there are going to be covered. And again, in community, like if we're part of a community where we're working together, that's going to be that sort of thing. Yeah, electromagnetic pulse. It's a type of weapon where they send out an electromagnetic pulse. It basically fries electronics. So your cell phone, your camera, computer, anything that has a computer or microchips or resistors, transistors, all those things get fried and then they don't work. So you go to the gas station, the pump doesn't work because it runs on computers. Try to start your car won't start unless it's a pre-1960 something car, right? So there's all those kind of things to think about. Like it gets fairly complicated, right? So you see there's like 4 kind of distinct categories, and this is what you were talking about a little bit. They kind of overlap in different ways, and I think all of these are important for us to think about, but again, we want to do it in a way that makes our life better. And so now we're going to look at some general principles of how to do that. And again, this list is not comprehensive, but I think it gets us a good start in kind of a way of thinking about this whole thing. So general versus specific, and by that I mean any kind of preparation or skill or technology that we have is going to fall somewhere on the continuum between a very general type of tool and a very specific type of tool. And I have 2 examples here. So these are on the continuum. This is very general purpose, and this is very specific. And maybe you can't see it very well. Does anybody have an idea? You know what this is, right? Everybody knows what this is. It's just a basic knife. Okay, there's nothing specific about this. It's very general design. It's got a nice little handle. It's not super big. It's not super small. It cost $10 at Walmart 20 years ago. This is actually the best money I ever spent. I thought I'd lose it out in the woods, but I've never lost it yet. Anyway, good quality little knife. This, anybody want to guess what that is? Huh? A scalpel? No? You're close. No. He was closer there. My medical people, help me out here. Oh, you're getting closer. You're getting closer. This is called a mojo dart. Okay? It's a large gauge needle with a catheter for to decompress a chest in somebody that has a tension pneumothorax. Now, could I do that? Hey, now we're talking. You are laughing at me, but I'll tell you what, if I ever roll up on somebody that needs this, they're not going to be laughing at me. Could I do that with this? Could I decompress someone's chest with a knife? Yes, I could. It would be messy, and I'd have some splaining to do, right? So yes, so now, so you understand, this is very general. This is very specific. Like could I carve a spear with this? Yes. Could I carve a spear with this? No. Like this is pretty much good just for poking holes in things that need to be ventilated. Like pretty much just decompressing the chest, maybe a few other things. I could probably modify it to start an IV if I needed to, that sort of thing. But like this is a general all-purpose, like it goes everywhere with me. I can carve stuff, I can whittle things, I can get splinters out. I can use it for self-defense. So like the list goes on and on. So the point being, we want to invest more of our time and energy into general purpose tools and strategies. Specific tools are good, but if we spend all of our time on specific tools, like we're going to have so much stuff, we're never going to be able to find the tool we're looking for. I sometimes have that problem actually in my shop. But the idea is, yes, there are sometimes only a specific tool will really do the job well. And in those cases, maybe it's worthwhile to invest time and energy, whether it's a physical tool or a skill set. But most of the time, we want to think about how can we have a tool that we can use for lots of different functions. So this is a quote. You may have seen this before. This gentleman actually was a famous science fiction writer, but not only that, he was an engineer and a pretty capable individual. So he said this: a human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, con a ship, design a building, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve equations, analyze a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. Specializations for insects. So I'm not sure I agree completely with all of that, but the general concept I agree with. Like, human beings should be good at a lot of different things, like general things, but not too much specialized. I like the idea that we should all have a solid general grasp of the basics, and then we can all specialize in something, but we shouldn't rely on our specialty to provide for all of our needs. Does that make sense? Maybe you could rely on your specialty to make money, but what if that goes away? Well, you still want to have the general ability to do all the basic stuff of life. Yeah. Yes. Right, absolutely. So I'm not totally opposed to specialization. I'm not saying that it's bad, but we don't want to rely too much on our own specialty being able to provide for this broad spectrum of things. So maybe you're not going to be a horticulturalist, but you could be. Some of us are, but it's helpful to know the general principles of what kind of stuff you can eat and when to plant it and how to grow, like basic stuff, right? And then when you have a specific problem, you go to the horticulturalist and say, hey, my garden, it was doing good, and then this happened. Can you come look at it and diagnose that for me and help me get squared away, right? I mean, sometimes specialists are good, but most of us, most of the time, shouldn't rely on specialists. Yeah?
Surplus and specialization. The reason we have specialization is because we have a surplus as a whole.
Right.
And so we can afford to specialize and train.
Yeah.
Yep. But when there's not a surplus,
that starts to go away. Yeah. Wes? Yeah, and that's exactly the point. Now, most people have become so specialized that their survivability has gone way down. It depends on this intricate web of interconnected specialists, and then when something happens to that, everybody's desperate, because going back to the blizzard people a few weeks ago, like, I saw pictures. There was a shopping mall on the other side of the fence. All they had to do is get out of their cars, walk over, climb the fence. There's a shopping mall. But the people sat on the road for 2 days in their cars freezing to death. I don't know why. Yeah. All right. So balance: skills, knowledge, relationship, and material. And I would actually, I was thinking about this. I should add to this physical conditioning. Physical conditioning or physical fitness. Because again, if our goal is to not die, and our health is so bad that we can't run a mile, and we get into a disastrous situation, and somehow we expect our road flares and our computer to save us, and we just need to move our body up the road, so that physical condition is important. Skills, knowledge, relationships, materials. It's not all just about how many beans, bandages, and bullets do you have stored up? Okay, storing stuff, having material stuff is good, but skills and knowledge are really important. Which is more general? Which is more general? Having, well, yeah. So you start thinking about that, right? So if you have a skill of growing food, and you have some knowledge, is that a skill? Could be, kind of a little blend there between skill and knowledge. Procuring firewood, that's takes some knowledge, it takes some skill, takes some sort of tools sometimes. Like in reality, if you're out in the woods, you don't need tools, you can gather up sticks, right? I mean, that takes a little knowledge of where to find that. Skills, knowledge, relationships, and material. So all of those are important, and we don't want to specialize too much in just one, right? I mean, if you're a rich person, you can just buy everything that you think you need to live on for the next 20 years and put it in your storage and live there by yourself. And then hire somebody. Yeah, I mean, so is that that's not quite what we're looking at. You get into an actual survival situation and you don't have knowledge and skills, somebody else with knowledge and skills and a lack of morality may just help themselves to all your stuff. So we've got to start thinking, and the relationships become important, right? So these are all important, and I just think it's important for us to not focus just on saving up stuff, because we could become a hoarder and have all sorts of stuff, and then the fire comes and burns it all up. Well, now what's your plan? Well, if you have some knowledge and skills, then you can move, you can start over, you can do stuff, right? Is that making sense? Skills. So differentiating between knowledge and skill. Knowledge is kind of the head part, like knowing about it, and the skill is a physical skill of doing the thing. As we go through the year, we're going to focus on different parts of this. Try to keep this in mind. Like, where does this fit in? We're going to have different experts talking about different things, and we'll develop some of that in our community here, and maybe spend a little bit of time thinking about where you are. Make a little grid. What's your physical, mental, spiritual, social, and your knowledge, skills, relationships, and material, and those things. Like, where are the gaps that you need to fill in, and how can you start doing that? All right, efficiency of time, energy, like physical and mental energy, and money. There's a lot of ways to think about efficiency. One of the important ones, I think, is, for example, how many of you here love MREs? Does everybody know what that is? Meal ready to eat. There's one person raise their hand. I had a friend who said an MRE is 3 lives for the price of 1. It's not really a meal. It's not ready, and you hardly can eat it. So, yeah. So, there's a lot of stuff out there, but just think about this. If you store up a bunch of stuff that you don't want to eat, why would you do that? Just because, you could spend a lot of money and get somebody to drop ship you a pallet of MREs and say, that's our preps, we're ready, we got 2 years worth of food right there. But then when it comes time to eat it, you're like, oh, this is horrible, I'd rather die than eat that stuff. Then what's the point? So is that efficient? And so you don't eat it, so then they're gonna eventually expire. Maybe some of that's not really food, so it doesn't expire, it just shelf stable forever. But we want to start thinking about, how are we using our time, and is that actually making our life better? Like, if we store up a bunch of food that we're never going to eat, does that actually make our life better? Like, no, it just uses up time and money and energy, and there's no payback for that. Contrast that with learning to grow your own food. Well, that's actually kind of fun. It contributes, like the gardening, getting outdoors, moving your body contributes to your health. You harvest the food, it's way better than anything you can buy. And if you store some of it, like, that's good to eat, right? And having a process. So yeah, I'm not saying don't store food, but I'm thinking let's think about how we do that so that we don't end up wasting a bunch of time and energy for something that we're not really going to use. What if that disaster never happens? So if the disaster never happens, and we're homesteaders, right? We grow a garden, we save our food, we save seeds, we learn gardening, we do all that. We have plenty of food stocked up. We rotate our stock, and the disaster never happens. Is our life better or worse? It's better. It's great. Like, we're actually happier and healthier that way. That's completely different than the, drop ship a bunch of MREs and there we go. And now is our life better or worse? Like, I don't know. If the disaster never happens, my life's worse because I just spent $2,000 on something we're not going to use. Is that making sense? So thinking about efficiency, using our time in a way not only to prepare for something that might not happen, but actually making our life better in the here and now with what God has given us. I mean, we're so blessed in this country and in this Scott Valley. If we focus on the fear of what might happen in the future and we forget to live a good life now with what we have, then that's an inefficient use of the gifts that we have. Does that make sense? Okay. Sustainability. So again, is our process going to be something that's sustainable? And sustainability is a word out there, like in the environmentalist community, and I guess that's worthwhile debates to have about sustainability on a grand scale. But what about sustainability on my local level? Is growing a garden something that we can do? Yeah. Okay. Is growing everything that I'm going to need for the rest of my life, or everything that I want, is that sustainable? Like, can I grow enough mangoes and avocados to keep myself happy? That's going to be tough to make that sustainable here. You know what I mean? So there's this sort of, we have to have a little bit of flexibility in our mindset. Like, what's our actual needs or wants? The things that we need, how can we do that in a reproducible manner so that it's sustainable? And even gardening, like if you do all your gardening, but you buy all your starts up at the co-op in Ashland, right? Even that, though, is not necessarily sustainable in the event of all sorts of things that could happen, right? So we want to start thinking about, saving seeds, growing your own, sharing among people in the valley here, developing that community where we have a network that's sustainable. And maybe somebody will have a greenhouse and grow some pineapples for us. Maybe not. Maybe that's a specialization thing. Oh yeah. All right. Is that making sense? So just a quick example of prepping. Like, do we consider ourselves preppers? I don't think we sort of are, but we don't really think of ourselves as preppers. We're living life, and like, we have all these layers and we do all this stuff. We had a few weeks ago, I came down with a fever and a headache, and it was not fun. And we had to isolate, because it was the thing. And we had one of her kind friends in our social network said, "Hey, you guys need us to bring you some food or something?" And we're like, "No, actually, our pantry's stocked. We have cans." Like, my wife is wonderful. she does all this stuff. Like we just go in the pantry and open a can, like canned soup and rice and beans and all that good stuff. Like we didn't need anything because we had everything. And it's not because we were prepping in case that happened. It's just our regular life. And so we were fine, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's just a way of living. I probably should wrap it up here, huh? I'm getting a little long-winded. So I don't know what we call it. We're gonna call this Purposeful Homesteader. That's a great name, I think. But it's really like we have to kind of be intentional about what all is included in that. You know, we have our friends from the Church of Latter-day Saints, and they use the term provident living. And I've never actually discussed with them what exactly they mean by that, but I think that kind of overlaps with what we're talking about. It's a way of providing, a living in a way that provides for the needs of our family, our community, and a nod to the gifts of God that He's provided for us. So I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. Vicky's gonna come back, and you have some like specifics for us on when we should be starting stuff and planting things for our local bioregion here. Yeah. Okay. Cool. And I'm gonna leave you with one final picture from.
On the end over here, there's a couple clipboards. Is if you're not currently on our mailing list and would like to be on, so you'd get notifications of our upcoming meetings and reminders, you can put your name and email address there. And then the other one is for topics or ideas on suggestions for what you'd like to hear be talked about in any given month. We have quite a list, but we're very much open to other ideas and thoughts somebody has. And if you would like to present something or know of somebody that would be really good at presenting something, then you can list that there. Okay. So, I guess I've got to get everything plugged in here. So every month we want to have a few minutes, a moment in the garden, and tasks on what we need to be doing in this upcoming month in relationship to our gardens. So how many of you have had or usually have a vegetable garden every year? Most of you? How many of you started last year for the first time gardening? Nobody, everybody's been doing it. Okay, good. Well, with all that happened in the world over the past couple of years, more people than ever have been growing their own food. Bonnie Plants, the company that makes plants, estimated that at least 20 million first-time gardeners picked up the hobby in 2020, and more were expected for 2021. So at each of our meetings, I mean, maybe not everybody in here is gardening, but I bet most of you want to be. I mean, after we've seen what's going on these last couple of years, I imagine that everybody wants to figure out how to grow more. So we thought each month, if we have just a little bit at the end on what we need to be doing this coming month, that it might be helpful for everybody. So, my thing's a little slow, and I'll probably hit it twice, and then it won't. There it goes. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about to do in January and February is to test the garden soil. Now, that's not typically the best time to test. According to the labs and what have you, they will tell you the fall is the better time. But since we're just starting now, and maybe some of you haven't tested your soil, I want to encourage you to do that. You know, having your soil tested, then you know what your soil is deficient in. You know what kind of problems you might be going to run into. We had a friend who moved to the valley a number of years ago and bought a home, had a garden area in the back. And so she was excited about it, and we encouraged her to have her soil tested. She did, and it came back and said that it was very, very high in a lot of the trace minerals. And there's different products. I know azomite, I think that's how you say it, is one of them, that puts these micronutrients into your soil. And some people have the thinking that if a little bit is good, a lot must be really good. So, you know, instead of paying attention to what the soil test says or the package itself, they just put a lot in it. Well, that garden wasn't even usable right then. The recommendation came back, leach it, you know, put tons of water on this garden to get rid of some of these minerals. We also knew of another family who had a garden area, and they were just, you know, compost is so good, and they were just putting lots of compost and all these good things on it, but the plants were just horrible. They just were not thriving. So someone came along and said, test your soil, see what's going on. They tested it, the results came back and said, abandon that site. It was too much of a good thing, had ruined it, and they couldn't continue growing there, so they had to develop another garden. So we are firm believers in testing. You don't necessarily have to test every year. We did for a while. Originally, when we started testing, it was telling us, you know, we needed, what was it? How many pounds? Oh, I have it written down right here. 50 pounds of phosphate in a 1,000 square foot area, and 50 pounds of limestone in this 1,000 square foot area. It was real depleted in some things. But then after a few years, then it was like, cut it down to 35 pounds. And to the point now where now we just are basically replacing what the plants are using every year. It built the soil up to that point, and we didn't have to keep putting so much stuff on it. Eventually, when you really want to talk about sustainability, then you really try to think about how you can amend your soils without buying ammonium sulfate and, you know, soft rock phosphate and all these things. That's another level, another one of those layers that hopefully we can get to. So if anybody's interested in having their soil test done, I brought some, what do you call it? Whatever they are, forms. We use Waypoint Analytical. They're out of Virginia. We've used a few different ones, and we really like them. It's cheap. It's only $16.50, and they test the micronutrients as well as, you know, the regular things. So anyway, I've got one of those if you want one and a sample how to fill it out. This is what the results come back when you fill out the paper properly. You ask them for recommendations, and it tells you how much to put on in a 1,000 square foot area of what, and it shows you how things are good, things that are low, and what have you. It's a pretty easy to read report. So we are in what hardiness zone? Does everybody know? We're in 7B. Are you in 7A in Wairika? We're in 7B here in Scott Valley. And for that, the average, now I'm talking about, okay, now I'm going to be talking about planning your garden plot. So when you plan your garden plot, you're going to know what your zone is, and that zone number is going to tell you when your last frost date is. And that's an important thing to know, because then you know when to start your seedlings so that they'll be ready when it's time to go into the ground. And, you know, it's kind of have to work backwards on that. So it's kind of interesting. I've kept note of this the last 4 years, but for zone 7B, the average last frost date that they state is between June 1 and June 10th. Well, at our house, our last 4 years, the last frost was June 10th. That's hard. You know, we were putting our garden in by Mother's Day. Someone first told us when we moved here, oh yeah, we get our garden in by Mother's Day. Then we were covering and covering because it kept having frosts. So then we go, okay, June 1, that's our date. Well, now it's kind of like June 10 would be good. Then we maybe don't have to cover at all. But then you have to time when you're going to be starting your plants to accomplish that. So right now, plan your garden plot, figure out your area and what you want to plant where. Consider the sun needs of your plants. Some need full sun, some can tolerate quite a bit of shade even. So figure that out, plan your garden plot. And you might think about crop rotation. Sometimes that's not easy, but it is kind of important because it helps reduce insect and disease problems that you might have. I have a paper up here, and these are all things you can come up and get as you want. There's one on crop rotation. It kind of gives one idea on how you can do the crop rotation thing. And then you might need to be buying seeds if you don't have any already. So far, I haven't heard of any shortages yet, but it could happen, especially if something else were to happen. So local, you know, at our Scott Valley Feed or whatever, online, I do have a list of places where we get a lot of our seeds. And remember, if you want to save your own seed, you need heirloom seeds, open pollinated. Then those seeds, when you save them off of the plant, they'll reproduce the plant that it came off of. Hybrids are fine. Hybrids are not genetically modified, so there's nothing really wrong with them. They just don't really usually reproduce themselves. Okay, so right now, you can plant by seed outdoors, peas, you know, snap peas, sugar peas, shelling peas. You can plant spinach, and you can plant early beets and carrots. So that's something you can get in right away. Sometimes I don't think soon enough sometimes, so it's helpful. I'm kind of a spreadsheet person, so I have spreadsheets that remind me what to do each month. So that's something you can work on right now. Yes. A variety. No, I don't think it is. It's just ones that you'll harvest smaller. You know, you won't wait until they're really big. You can just start harvesting them earlier. Yes, successive. Yeah, yeah. We personally don't do our carrots that way. We plant them all at once. And I mean, we have half of our carrot crop still in the ground, eating on it right now. You know, we eat it when we can, and then it keeps going. Okay, so planting by seed indoors in February so that we'll be ready to go outdoors when it's time. Brassicas, that's the cabbage and broccoli and cauliflower things. That's what mostly is in mine here. I started them in January. They can actually be planted outdoors here in March and April. Usually I put them in April. If you wait too long, which I've had happen plenty of times, it just gets too warm too early, and you don't get the nice big heads. So the earlier you can get them in the ground, you kind of have to watch the weather, but they can tolerate cold. So the brassicas, the lettuce, and some of mine here, I have lettuces. I like to start some to put in the ground, and then you can seed them. And this is by seed indoors. But then when I put these out, I can also put seeds in the ground. Spinach, kale, Swiss chard, and peppers. Bell peppers in particular, maybe all peppers, but I know bell peppers are very slow producing, slow germinating and developing. So I start mine really early. I haven't started them yet, but I will be in February getting my peppers going so that they'll be ready when they're time to go out. I use seed trays. People can use paper cups. There's, you know, any number of things. I start mine in the greenhouse. I put it all together, but I bring them in the house. I have grow lights to put under them. That's what helps them to I don't have a window that's sufficient to get enough light or whatever, so I have a couple grow lights to grow them with. And like I said, the starting time is based on your last frost date or your planting date with the different items. Okay, another thing you can be doing in your garden, does anybody have strawberry plants or strawberry? Yeah? Well, now is the time to be cleaning your strawberry beds. Cleaning out the old leaves, taking the runners, you can transplant runners. It's also time to buy them if you're going to want to start a bed. I know Scott Valley Feed, I talked to them, they don't get theirs until about the end of February, and they're in pots. They're not like if you want a whole bed of them, you need quite a few plants. So, but they're in pots, maybe 4 to a pot, but they should have theirs at the end of February. The Grange Co-op in Medford, which is where we usually have gotten ours when we didn't have runners, they should be there now. I talked to them a couple weeks ago and they were due in anytime. And you can get them in bundles of like 25 and they are pretty good. Do you guys have at Valley?
We don't sell them.
Okay. Yeah, and that's with Scott Valley Feed too. Okay, so work on your strawberry plants. Prune your blackberry plants. They can be pruned anytime in the winter. Prune your blueberries, which this one's a new one to me. We've never pruned our blueberries and we haven't done really well with them either. But according to the Oregon State University Extension Service, the best time to prune blueberries is from January to early March when they're in their dormant stage. So that might be something to look into if you have blueberries. And these small berries are a really good thing to grow. They don't take up that much space. They're easy and they're a good addition to your food that you're growing. And then it's time to, between January and February, it's time to prune your grapes, and your fruit trees should be pruned between December and mid-February. And dormant spray, if you have, how many of you have fruit trees? Very many have, okay, good. It's time to put dormant sprays onto your apples, pears, and maybe plums, I think, trees, and peaches. It controls insects, scale, and different things. And what the commercial ones you buy are a petroleum product, and it just goes on the trees and it suffocates the bugs and stuff. I have some recipes here. Oh yeah, you said I was going to walk away from this. We've chosen not to use the petroleum products, and we've got some recipes here for things that have like canola oil or Castile soap and some other, baking soda and things in it. So you can grab some recipes if you'd like something like that. Yes.
What is the best way to learn food properly?
Yeah, I'd say YouTube. We kind of turn that over to our son-in-law. That's his role. So yeah, it's tricky and it's very expensive to hire it done. I've heard, people say that they've hired it done. I guess that's fine if you've got 1 or 2 trees, but not if you have, 40 trees or something. That doesn't seem cost effective. So learning to do it yourself is best. Yeah. Okay. Oh, is that the end? I guess it was. Okay. So, do your planning, plan where you're going to plant things, get some seeds started indoors, and you can start some things outdoors and do your pruning and be all ready for next month where we'll talk about what you can be doing in the following month. Oh, thank you. Yes, I started these in January, and I've got mostly the brassicas, the broccoli and cauliflower and cabbages. I've got some lettuces, a few old seeds that I stuck in to see if they would germinate. But I like to start my spinach because it seems to be, I have a hard time with spinach. and some lettuces. So I started those in January, and they'll be ready to go out, in March.
How long do you leave for those seed trays before you can pot them up?
They're ready to come out of there, my bigger
So
ones.
you plant them up in 6-packs and you're ready to grow it?
I do, yeah. I don't know that you have to. I was a novice gardener when I started this 10 years ago, and my cousin worked for a plastic pot company, and he gave me all these pots, and he says, you've got to plant them in little things and let their roots go out and touch the edge, and then you plant them in bigger ones. Well, I've seen people who didn't do that, and they did just fine. But that's how I started, and I've got all kinds of pots to do that with, so I do. I start little, I go bigger, and sometimes I've started too soon, and I end up with a whole greenhouse full of gallon pots that I'm trying to maneuver around. So I'm trying to get my timing a little better so I'm not starting them too soon. But anyway, yeah, so these are what's growing right now, but now come February, I'll start on some of these other ones we're talking about, the peppers and stuff. Okay, any other questions? Our next meeting on your thing should be there. I think it's February 27th. Basically, I think we're shooting for the last Sunday of the month. So invite your friends, tell others, take extra flyers, and I think we have a really good community here that could really learn from each other and have a good working relationship with a lot of people.
Is there anything you could grow in a greenhouse right now?
In a greenhouse, my greenhouse I use them for my starts, and I don't have a hoop house or a big growing greenhouse. We have a conversation going on with our son-in-law about that. He really thinks we need one, but I keep thinking that we really can't grow without heat in those greenhouses this time of year. Do you concur?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a greenhouse, but I use a heat lamp.
Yeah, you've got to have some sort of heat. So we haven't really got to that point yet. Yeah, you can do an underground one, and yeah.
You can use a heated greenhouse, but then just like a tunnel hoop house without extra heat gives you additional protection, and it actually will help the growing season.
Yeah,
A little bit.
extend it. Do you, for a hoop house, do you have one like row cover hoop houses, or do you plant out here and then plant some things in your hoop house?
You know, I try all kinds of 6-foot tall hoop house is great. But right now I'm doing a 3-foot because I don't
Oh.
have
Yeah. We've been thinking doing the row covered ones so that we can extend it on both sides of the summer.
One other thing I mentioned was there are some good resources and some magazines that are out. One is Mother Earth News. It's really good with these sorts of homesteading tips and articles.
Okay. It's for the purpose of the video, Mother Earth News was mentioned. So that's Mother Earth News as a magazine that has a lot of homesteading and gardening tips that are helpful.
We used to read that back in the 60s.
Yeah, it's been around a long time.
It's still in publication. It's still coming out.
That's
It's still
amazing.
good stuff.
Oh, really? Okay. At the Etna Library, you can get this Mother Earth News.
Yes, we have.
Okay, does any other questions?
So what's next month's topic?
Well, it's going to be on gardening, and it'll be a whole presentation on gardening, and it's going to be by our master gardener here, is going to be presenting for us. So I'm sure she's going to have lots of tips and ideas on.
And it'll be on YouTube?
Oh, yes, it's being recorded. Again, if you're not on our email list, stick your name on there, and we will be sending out the link to the recording, and then also a reminder each month and when the program is. Bob? What? My deck? Oh, share it? Yeah, I've got printouts here, not of my PowerPoint, but I can if you want. Okay, like to show what to do what month. Those. Okay. Okay. All right. Any final words? Well, thank you guys all for coming, and come back next month and bring others with you. Okay. Thank you guys.